While once seen as an obscure hobby, today Dungeons & Dragons is bigger than ever. There's tons of references to the game in modern media, and there's a massive calendar of high-production role-playing shows that air every week. And while I can't say I've ever gotten too deep into the world of fantasy role-playing, I'll never forget my first experience with Pokémon Jr. I'm not kidding! This tiny little box from the late 90s is our next Nintendo board game review, and it's a gateway drug for kids into the big boy world of Dungeons & Dragons. It's described on the back as a game where you tell the story, and it's the story where you play the game. This product comes from Wizards of the Coast, which I'm sure many of you remember as the distributors of Pokémon cards from 1998 until 2003. This product is the only non-TCG Pokémon game Wizards ever had involvement in. The game was designed by huge Dungeons & Dragons influencers, which is fitting because Wizards purchased the rights to D&D in 1997. And yes, this guy really goes by the name of Stan. Like that, with the exclamation point after it. So what's in this tiny little box? While it's missing the grandeur and sheer number of components of something like Master Trainer, this little thing packs a punch. You get a scenario book, a die, some flipping coins, damage counters, player checklists, and a huge pile of these big, beautiful Pokemon cards. I've played a lot of tabletop games over the years, but somehow this 20-year-old bargain pack has some of the nicest quality cards I've ever played with. The cardstock is thick, and it would be impossible to bend these without considerable force. Also, the cards are colorful and double-sided. You know how I feel about Pokédex entries, and every card has a little Pokédex and an entry on each side. They're pretty basic, but every once in a while I'll find an entry on one of these cards that gives me a laugh. Machop is one of the most intelligent Pokemon. Really? Machop? Sometimes Machoke is too busy looking at itself in the mirror to train. Well, easy come, easy go. These cards are also the game's main form of combat, and the entire game is basically combat. Like a traditional Pokemon card, your characters have 2 attacks, except this time it's 1 on each side of the card. Instead of the usual D&D D20, most of your attacks here are based on rolling a simple D6. Pokemon typically have a weak attack with a really high chance of hitting, and a more powerful attack with more damage but a 50% or less hit chance. Deciding when it's right to risk it for the biscuit or play it safe is your main strategy. Some of the attacks let you roll a die and then flip a coin as well. I love how Pikachu is smiling on the heads, but it's just freaking dead on the tails. This game is incredibly catered towards young children. After all, it's called Pokémon Jr, but I think they do it in a smart way. Your booklet, which contains all the game's rules and stories, is intended to be read by a single adult for a group of 1 to 6 kids. All the players get a starter Pokémon with one of the 4 classics and a duplicate Pikachu or duplicate Bulbasaur if you've got 6. The parent plays the DM-like narrator role, reading the story and asking questions to players to describe the situation they are in. But think like Dora the Explorer level here. Here's an example. What do you see and hear in the forest? What kinds of animals live in the forest? Is it scary in the forest? Are your Pokemon afraid? So yeah, it's super for kids, but opening up time for your players to use their imagination is something you want to do if you want to be a good DM. There's even segments where the narrator is instructed to push the story forward if your players can't come to the right decision on their own. The only thing that's absent here in the scenarios that I would have loved as a kid is a branching storyline. I ate those choose your own adventure books up when I was in the target demographic for this game, and I think it would have added some replayability to the whole experience. Instead, it's a pretty linear journey through episodes inspired by the early anime. Fighting a flock of Spearow, saving a sick Pikachu, putting out a fire, that kind of stuff. Every once in a while you'll get a chance to find a wild Pokemon, but it's a little flawed. You know how early Master Trainer games separated your encounter difficulty by color, so that as you get deeper in the game, you find stronger Pokemon? Well, this game is more like Master Trainer 3. You take a random Pokemon out of the entire deck and try and capture it. Now, there isn't a huge difference between the best and worst Pokemon in this game, but that still won't stop the immersion break of capturing a Charmeleon that immediately replaces your Charmander in Chapter 2. One fun thing, though, is checking off the Pokemon that you own on this list as you capture them. Only the Pokemon whose names are written in red are encounterable in this game's scenarios, which looks especially ridiculous when you flip to the second side. That's a whole lot of not red, but it is a fun way to save your progress by checking the little boxes. There isn't a whole lot of depth, but there is a certain kind of charm to the experience that made it perfect for me and a friend when this game was first released. However, There is one thing about this experience that I can remember clearly, and that's that it's kind of brutal. Why is it like this? Why is every single Pokemon board game like this? If you and your friends fail to a challenge with Gary, he calls you a bunch of losers. Like, the narrator actually has to read the line where you call all the kids that you're playing with losers. And if you somehow have the misfortune of losing to Team Rocket, well, Team Rocket steals everything but the trainer's starting Pokemon. Erase all but one check from each trainer's checklist. Oh my god! First of all, I was not told that we needed to use pencil. I can't erase this. But secondly, what the heck? You have to get kind of unlucky to lose this encounter, but it can happen. Die rolls are die rolls. There's no redemption to free your lost partners. They're just completely gone. Who knew Team Rocket could be so competent, and that even a game with Junior in the title could be so soul-crushing? But the same way that your Pokemon companions might disappear in an instant, Pokemon Jr. disappeared from history. You'll notice this box has the number 1 on it and a subtitle. And the back of the box says, look for other Pokemon Jr. adventure games for more stories and more Pokemon power cards. But unfortunately, no additional cards or stories for this game were ever released, and Wizards lost the Pokemon license a few years later. I'm not sure if it was because the game never took off, or because the trading cards were so much more profitable that they took all the resources, but it's always a bummer to see something with setup never get to fully deliver. It's kind of wild that Pokemon Jr. even exists, but it is pretty cool that Wizards took their shot at combining two of the biggest properties into a pretty unexpected crossover. The game is incredibly linear and simplified for kids, but I did enjoy it as a kid and it's been fun to revisit. It's always a pleasure checking out Nintendo board games for this little side series that we do, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed today's junior-sized episode. I'll see you guys next time with more Nintendo content. Also, thanks to Pokemon fans Zach and Liam for giving me this new copy of the game. I wrote your guys' name on the side of the box. You guys handed me this thing at a Pokemon Nationals tournament a couple years ago, but after all these years, I was finally able to make a video out of it. Hope you enjoyed.